Today's headline is with a sack over his head. The subheadline says, An MD's unusual adventure in an unknown part of Arizona territory. It says, some time ago, the little railroad town of Williams, Arizona territory was the scene of quite a strange adventure, at least so far as one of its prominent citizens was concerned. Williams is on the line of the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad, at the foot of Bill Williams Mountain. Nearly directly opposite the depot, and about midway in the built-up portion of the street, is a low board office, upon the door of which this legend is inscribed, Dr. Bishop's office. It was in a portion of that office that the strange adventure of that November night began, and it was in this room that the whole history of the night was related by the doctor to the writer. About the middle of last November, began Dr. Bishop, on a very dark and chilly night, after reading until quite late, I turned on the light and was soon wrapped in slumber. It must have been 11 o'clock when I was awakened by a knock. I asked what was wanted. The answer came that a man had been badly hurt and required my presence at once. After lighting a candle, the door was opened, and in stepped two gentlemen, both well dressed, and both indicating by their faces that their education had been in no wise neglected. In fact, they were Eastern born and Eastern bred. The spokesman, who was the tallest of the two, and who, by the way, was a splendid type of manhood, urged upon me the necessity of being somewhat in a hurry about making my preparations. For, said he, you must go with us, and we have a long ride to take before morning. The doctor demurred at going at all, and said that it was certainly a very strange proceeding to ask a man 50 years of age to go out on such a night, and especially with two men, of whom he knew nothing whatever. It doesn't make a particle of difference who we are, what we are, or where we're from, remarked the tall stranger. You have got to go with us, and the quicker you make up your mind to do so, the pleasanter it will be for all concerned. How was the man hurt? Inquired the doctor. He was shot, was the answer. Arguments based on the age and health of physicians were of no avail, and in a shorter time than it takes to tell it, the party, including Dr. Bishop, were out in the cool, damp air of the night. It took but a few moments for the strangers to find their horses, and to point out a splendid big chestnut, whose every motion and form proved him to be a thoroughbred, as the animal upon which our friend, the doctor, was to make the unknown journey. That's your horse, doctor, said the strangers. He's a good one, and as sure-footed as any man in Arizona. You need never be afraid of him for a moment. He's as gentle as a kitten. Into the saddle went the now thoroughly mystified man of medicine, and the two strangers mounted two horses nearly, if not quite the equals of the chestnut stallion. The party had hardly got clear of the few midnight lamps at Williams when a halt was called, and our MD was informed that it would be necessary to blindfold him, as his companions had no idea of allowing him the faintest conception of the direction in which the trio were traveling. The doctor, of course, objected to this kind of treatment, but he was quickly voted down and compelled to submit himself to the inevitable. A sack, which one of the party carried, was quickly drawn over his head, and then they were again ready to advance. Imagine, if you can, the feelings of this follower of Aesculapius in the company of two men, neither of whom he had ever seen before, riding he knew not whither, seated upon a magnificent thoroughbred stallion, and this all happening in the dead of night on the sandy mesas of Arizona. The horses were given the spur, with the admonition to the doctor to give them a free rein, and away the band dashed. On they rode, hour after hour, uphill and downhill, now crossing a narrow stream, now a broader one, into and across arroyos, through what seemed to be dense forests, and out again on the sandy plains, never once stopping, not even speaking a loud word, the whole being bent on early arrival at some specified point. Night began to break into morning, and morning into broader day. The sun came up in all its western splendor, and yet our travelers never once spoke of stopping. It must have been 8 o'clock, when all at once the rein of the chestnut stallion was grasped and a halt called. And now for the first time since midnight, Dr. Bishop was allowed to look around him, his forced blindness having been removed by his guides. They seemed to be in a beautiful valley, down which trickled a stream of clear, sparkling water, and all around them the earth was covered with a garment of grama grass. They had halted immediately in front of a small but neat-appearing log house, the doors of which stood open. Only 3 persons were in sight, the 2 strangers, companions in the night's ride, and another man whom the doctor had not before seen. Go down to the brook, doctor, take a drink of water, and refreshing bath, and by that time breakfast will be ready. I did as directed, said the doctor, And I don't believe there is another such stream of water in Arizona. I can assure you, it was to me the grandest bath I ever took. As yet, the surgeon had not seen his patient, but breakfast was soon disposed of, the bacon and beans being devoured with a relish, and then the patient was disclosed, lying upon a pile of Navajo blankets in one corner of the log building. He must have been a man of 30 years of age, black hair, black eyes, and fully 6 feet tall, and heavy set in proportion, but every pound of weight seemed to be muscle, said Dr. Bishop. I knelt down beside him and found that the wound was immediately over the heart, and that it had been made by a large-sized revolver. The preliminary examination and a few questions elicited the fact that although a .45 caliber ball was still inside, yet it was by no means dangerous. The ball was probed for and extracted, the patient never uttering a complaint. The wound was bandaged up and application prepared for its dressing, and the surgeon's mission was ended. All day and the first part of the evening was spent at the camp, and then the horses were again saddled, and the ride homeward was only a repetition of the night before, including the blindfolding of the doctor. We arrived in Williams at 4 a.m., before anybody was moving, said Dr. Bishop, and I was landed in my little home here, none the worse for my 36 hours' experience. The tall stranger, without asking me to my charges, immediately counted out $50, and handing it to me, remarked that they were a little hard up just now, but would pay me fully in a short time. The doctor went on to state that the strangest part of the whole affair happened only a few days ago. The wounded man came over to my office just before the train pulled out, and laying $100 on my desk, remarked that I ought to consider myself paid. Rushing out, he just caught the train, and that is the last I've ever heard of any of the trio. Dr. Bishop could not explain in any way the strange occurrence, but surmised that there might have been a duel between men of some standing, and that having failed to bring a surgeon with them, he had been called on to act in that capacity. This article originally came from the Albuquerque Review of New Mexico. This story came from the great state of Iowa, being reported in the Ottumwa Daily Democrat of August 8, 1883. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.